Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and one of the biggest pieces of health and fitness news that has been circulating in a while has been out over the last day or two. I've seen it through a lot of fitness personalities, social media, so we need to talk about it. And this is really important because these sort of conversations even affect those of us over here, even guys who are worried about their physiques and stuff, because they're trying to always determine what a clean diet is or whatever. Well, knowing which diets and which aspects of your diets are going to affect heart attacks and heart disease definitely falls into that category. And I think most of you guys would agree. Because most of you guys out there, you're not trying to have a heart attack at 35 or 40. Those of you who are lifting weights, because a lot of you guys are carrying extra muscle mass. I mean, I'm carrying extra muscle mass, extra body weight. We're not trying to have heart attacks here. So this affects even guys who are bigger and well above the normal BMI due to their lifting or anabolics or whatever else they're doing. So something to factor in. But yeah, let's talk about it. Getting my places in here. Well, apparently information has come out that all this research back from the 60s and 70s that formed a lot of the lipid hypothesis and everything, it affected government policy. It appears that the sugar industry actually spent large sums of money. Now, I haven't seen the actual numbers, but some of the people interviewed who discussed it have said it was enormous amounts of money. So I'm assuming we're not just talking about a couple $100,000 here. They're basically talking about millions of dollars, and probably 1960s and 1970s millions of dollars. So what does a lot of this mean? What exactly happened? Well, it appears the sugar industry paid researchers to get the data right, meaning they wanted data showing that it was in fact only saturated fat and the lipid hypothesis and cholesterol, dietary cholesterol and saturated fat, that was the primary dietary cause of heart disease, which basically means, heart attacks, guys. All right, so what this does and doesn't mean is a lot of different things. So let's discuss that. First of all, when research is biased, financially biased, it doesn't automatically mean that it's wrong. In a lot of cases it can be, meaning it depends upon the interest of the other party. Meaning there could be a financial bias to make sure that data says something and maybe says something stronger than it really should. And researchers can be bought, can be paid off, or have their own personal bias going. If they have a financial bias, there's going to be a subconscious tendency for them to adjust variables and come to conclusions based upon their personal financial interest if they have a financial involvement. So for example, a researcher who works for a supplement company could have financial bias to really want that supplement to show the results that he wants. And in his mind, when he sets the variables, because the variables of the study control everything, he might set the variables in such a way that they ensure that instead of getting a really weak response towards what he wants to see, it comes back more impressive. Does it automatically mean that he lied? No, because it could be subconscious. Now, when there's direct fiddling like this, yeah, they're going to cook the books a lot, and apparently that's what happened. That doesn't automatically mean it, but when you get to a case like this, I think it's fair to say that it's pretty serious. When they're spending that type of money and they have to redo the data and cook the books a couple different times, which is what's being claimed, well, and done in multiple studies that way, it's pretty serious. Now, what basically this happened was it removed refined sugars, because not all sugars are equal, and that's something everyone needs to remember too. The word sugar on the back of your label of stuff doesn't mean the same thing that we're talking about here always. The sugars they're talking about, the sugar industry, is refined sugars. That's going to be table sugar, also known as sucrose, and things like high fructose corn syrup. Basically all these highly refined sugars. We have no fiber, nothing to slow their absorption, extremely concentrated fructose in there. Because fructose is the sugar we're worried about, because it has turned out that sugars do contribute to cardiovascular disease, but it's not all sugars across the board. It's not every single sugar. It's not lactose, galactose, everything else. It's fructose. And both of those sugars are pure sugar calories, concentrated sugar that are around half glucose and about half fructose. And fructose is the one that seems to really mess with blood lipids. And I think that surprises a lot of people because one of your worst type of cholesterol is called triglycerides. Well, a high fructose intake, not a moderate, but it could be a moderate fructose intake doesn't impact it. Meaning you could go eat 5 or 6 bananas for breakfast every morning, and that is still a pretty low fructose load. If that's the only fructose you eat for the day, you're not at any risk. But when you take your Frosted Flakes in the morning and you dump 2 spoons of table sugar on it, and then at lunchtime you drink 2 regular sodas, and then later in the afternoon you drink 2 or 3 more regular Coca-Colas, we're getting up there. We're getting pretty serious at that point. That is the type of sugar intake and fructose intake that has been associated with basically cardiovascular disease, fatty liver, things like that. So they cooked the books to hide this because they didn't want the public to know that refined sugars were actually going to contribute to your heart attacks, your strokes, things like that. Again, through fatty liver, elevated triglycerides, all of these things. In fact, we know that extremely high fructose intakes in many individuals for prolonged periods of time can even replicate some of the effects in the liver of an alcoholic of drinking excessive amounts of alcohol. Should also raise the point that if you're going to drink alcohol regularly, think about that in terms of your sugar intake, meaning if you're going to drink alcohol regularly, you probably don't want to double dip there. Pardon the pun with what I'm doing, but you don't want to double dip and consume a high fructose intake also. You're just doubling up on the damage to your liver, and again, that liver damage seems to be correlated with problems with your cholesterol levels. So what we ultimately come down to with all of this is that they both impact it. And that's the other thing that people need to remember. What you're always going to see is going to be the keto advocates and some of the paleo advocates and other people jumping up and screaming, aha, see, we told you guys it was sugar all along and not large amounts of saturated fat and cholesterol. No, that's not what it says at all. That's not what it says at all. Just because you find something else that was hidden that helped contribute to a given problem doesn't mean that the other stuff doesn't contribute as well. They do seem to contribute. But again, it's not universal. It doesn't mean everyone who follows a ketogenic style diet is going to have heart issues because most of them are in a calorie deficit. If you're maintaining a normal body weight, a healthy body weight, and you're physically active, large amounts of saturated fat and cholesterol don't seem to really impact your blood lipids that much negatively. It's the sedentary person who's overeating and gaining weight. That's where they really become problematic. Now, and I'll see some argue, well, maybe it's similar with high fructose intakes. Well, that seems to be the case. There are endurance athletes who consume large amounts of fructose. Again, take durian riders. Even large amounts of processed sugar thrown in just to get his calories, who seems to have okay blood lipids, but he's also a very serious endurance athlete. And the take-home message there is, yeah, it's one thing if you're burning through all of these sugars and fructose for fuel. All right, that's one thing. It's another thing if you're not. And you want to talk about a double doozy, and this is where our obesity epidemic really comes from. And all of our heart attack rates. How about the people who don't work out every day? How about the people who don't exercise at all, who don't do cardio, who don't do resistance training, who consume pretty hefty amounts of saturated fat, hefty amounts of dietary cholesterol, and who sit around drinking Coca-Cola and putting table sugar on stuff? How's that for a combination? That's all 3 factors contributing into one person, meaning being sedentary, so you don't exercise, consuming hefty amounts of saturated fat and dietary cholesterol, and hefty amounts of refined sugars. And that's the thing that we need to look at. We look at these different causes, and they're not universal. They're not universal. In isolation, sometimes they may not contribute significantly at all. It's when you start stacking combinations. All right, you have someone who's sedentary and consumes a lot of dietary fat, or sedentary and consumes a lot of refined sugar. All right, they're in a bad situation. Someone who's somewhat physically active who consumes a lot of saturated fat and refined sugar may have problems also. because there's still, you've got three big factors here. They're hitting two of them. That's not a good combination. You know, people need to realize there's a difference between being moderately physically active and being a serious athlete. And it's a big difference. Serious athletes can get away with all sorts of stuff in their diet. Serious athletes can get away with eating donuts and drinking beer before bed every night if they're burning through that many calories. If you have an athlete who burns through 4,500 calories a day, and just to maintain their body weight and to keep their performance where it needs to be, if they need to eat Krispy Kreme donuts and drink beer before bed, if they're so physically active that they're not gaining a single ounce of body weight doing that, usually their blood work still looks pretty good. And I think that's the take home with all of this that we need to understand. A lot of people say things like you can't out-train a bad diet. Well, really? I see some athletes out there who sure as hell do out-train a bad diet, and they have great blood markers. They're lean, they look athletic, and they eat garbage. I'm not saying they don't eat some of their healthy food too. They don't get their vegetables and stuff in. But a lot of them have to pack in empty junk calories just to maintain their body weight and performance. But you take someone who's sedentary and you put them on that same diet that athlete follows, that lean 180-pound hybrid athlete who does everything from endurance work to resistance training. You take the average sedentary person and put him on that person's same diet, you're going to have a guy who's 270 to 300 pounds within a couple of years, who's at risk for heart attack, diabetes, cancer, and everything else. So that's the thing that you've got to realize when it comes to this stuff. Yes, these studies have been biased. Yes, it's bad. Yeah, it's a serious ethical issue in the medical fitness and nutrition world because it's happened and we need to take it seriously. But we do need to understand that any one of these factors in isolation isn't causing cardiovascular disease in large amounts by itself. It's the fact that we stack all of them together in a society. That's what's killing people. And it's killing a fuckload of people. Look at the heart attack death rate in the United States. It's bad. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.